The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Russel Norman.
Yes, co-leader of the Greens and protester is Russel Norman. G'day there, Russell.
Morning, Wammo.
All right, okay. Where do we start with this one? Bit of controversy at the end of last week with the Chinese Vice President visiting Parliament. You decided to get right up in his face with the Tibetan flag. And then you got shoved around by. Hang on, this is my story. Got shoved around by some Chinese guards there, some of his security. They ripped the flag off you. They stood on it. You grabbed it back, and now John Key has apologised on behalf of, I think, of all New Zealand.
Yeah. So that's one story.
Yes.
So another story, my story, is that I was standing quite a long way away from where the Vice President was going to go, holding the Tibetan flag, standing still, when I started to get harassed by the Chinese government security guards.
But hang on, what's a long way away? It was a few metres.
5-6 metres.
Okay, well.
Kind of, well out of his personal space, because I didn't particularly wish to be there. And I wasn't moving or speaking. I was just standing there holding the flag. I was actually doing what Rod did in 2005, which was the part of what I just wanted to do the same.
Well, Rod was further away, yeah, and he wasn't.
No, he wasn't. I was in the same spot.
Really? Exactly the same spot?
Yeah, pretty much exactly.
Because the footage I saw from him, it looked like he was down with the other protesters, but on the inside cordon. No, he was standing at the base of the steps. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Wait for it.
And so, and so then one of the Chinese government security guards came along and started kind of harassing me. And so I tried to duck and weave to get away from that one, and ended up closer to the security entrance, closer than I certainly wanted to be. And then a whole bunch of them grabbed me, and Umbrella Man stuck his umbrella over my head, and I kind of dodged forward to avoid the umbrella, which kind of descended on me from behind. And then one of the other ones grabbed the flag, and I leapt forward to grab the flag back. So I did end up getting closer than I intended, but was only trying to escape the depredations of the Chinese government security guards.
Now, there's so many elements to this. First of all, protesting about the Tibetan situation. Some people are saying, well, is that the right thing to be doing when someone like the Vice President of China visits? Is that the right thing for an MP to be doing inside Parliament grounds?
Well, I think I represent some of the people of New Zealand, and a lot of people in New Zealand care very deeply about human rights and democracy. The Chinese Communist Party government is a brutal dictatorship. Amnesty International's latest report says repression is getting worse in China. They kill people, literally. They torture people. They lock them up if they disagree with them. Editors of newspapers now are under enormous pressure if they tell the truth. The Sanlu massacre, the melamine disaster that Fonterra was involved in. So one guy set up a group calling for compensation for the babies that were killed or the 300,000 that were injured. He's now facing a 5-year jail term for setting up that group. Another guy circulated a petition calling for human rights in China. He got locked up for 11 years. So this is a brutal dictatorship. And, everyone else, the other parties might want to suck up to them. I don't. I don't approve of them. I don't think what they're doing is right.
So rather than shouting free Tibet, maybe it would have been better to go down the line of, let's have some better human rights going on in China.
Well, I actually think I probably did say something like that at the end as well. I mean, what's happened is that in some respects, because the Tibet's become the flashpoint, and right now there's 3 Tibetan environmentalists who have been locked up by the Chinese government because they've been campaigning for the environment. But it's not just the Tibetans. In a way, the Tibetan cause has become a flashpoint for broader issues of human rights and democracy. You could talk about heaps of different groups being suppressed in China.
Absolutely. Okay. What about the fact that the national government is now saying, well, the visiting dignitaries need to keep their dignity?
Well, they're perfectly capable of keeping their dignity as long as they respect our right to stand there holding a Tibetan flag. I mean, I know that the Chinese government finds the Tibetan flag itself offensive, and I know that Murray McCully, our foreign minister, says, well, one can have freedom of speech as long as one doesn't offend people. My view is that you don't have freedom of speech if you're not allowed to offend people.
Yeah.
And frankly, if the Chinese government doesn't want to see the Tibetan flag, well, that's too bad. They're in New Zealand. We've got a democracy and freedom of speech. And I think the craven apology is embarrassing, actually.
I think it would be hard to find any rational person disagreeing with the fact that the Chinese security should not have touched you, or should not have touched anyone inside Parliament grounds, and particularly should not have touched a member of Parliament. I think that would be very hard to disagree with. That should not have happened. Why did it happen? I mean, surely the security detail for this, on the New Zealand side, should have had full control.
That was my assumption as well, and I think looking forward, what we need to ensure is that the New Zealand police do have control. I mean, I talked to parliamentary security afterwards, and they said it was the New Zealand police that were in control of the operation, but there weren't a lot. I mean, well, there were a few New Zealand police and diplomatic protection squad people there. In fact, one of the DPS officers was trying to get them off me, but
it's just an embarrassment, absolute embarrassment.
It was embarrassing. I mean, but they were just overwhelmed by the number, because a minibus full of Chinese government security pulled up, and they basically took control of the situation.
Okay, now Lockwood Smith looks like he might want to change the rules about MPs protesting inside Parliament grounds.
Yeah, and the question will be, does the National Party, Lockwood and the rest, use this as an opportunity to clamp down on free speech in Parliament? Or rather, do they use it as an opportunity to make sure that MPs are protected so that they can hold up a Tibetan flag in silence while standing still at the base of the steps? And it will be very interesting to see whether Lockwood follows the Prime Minister's line, which is that he doesn't like people having free speech, or whether he actually protects the parliamentary free speech.
I personally found the apology to the Chinese offensive.
Yeah, me too.
Because it was one of our most basic values here in New Zealand, is the right to protest, and to have an apology made because someone was protesting about a subject that the Chinese Vice President didn't like. It's highly offensive. Yeah,
craven, I think, is my favourite adjective of the moment. It is quite shocking. I mean, it's interesting. The parties of the right, they talk a lot about, how they have these fundamental beliefs about democracy and freedom. But when push comes to shove, democracy and freedom seem to be put in the back seat when trade with that brutal dictatorship kind of is at the forefront. I mean, I think obviously we have to have economic and diplomatic relationships with China, and we're going to continue to do that. But there have to be some fundamental values that we don't compromise on. And one of them has to be freedom of speech.
The line should be drawn there, surely.
Yeah, we have to draw the line at freedom of speech, and advocating, we're allowed to advocate our own democracy. I tell you, the other thing that's interesting is China's going to be a huge power in the world, and there's a huge battle going on in China at the moment over these exact issues. And we've got to decide, do we want to support the democratic forces in our own little way, or do we want to support the brutal dictatorship? Because, there is if you read all the media that's going on there, there's heaps of kind of underground opposition to the government, and lots of editors of newspapers getting into trouble and all that kind of stuff. And Google right now is asking Europe and the United States to put pressure on China to stop censoring the internet.
Yeah.
If you go to yahoo.cn and type in Tiananmen Square massacre, it will come back and say no matches found. It comes back, of course, in Chinese, but you can translate it. But if you go now, Google have moved their server to Hong Kong, which isn't censored, and they've refused to censor. They used to censor, but they won't censor. If you type in Tiananmen Square massacre, you'll get back a whole bunch of results. And the Chinese government is now censoring access to the Google site in Hong Kong in order to prevent Chinese people accessing it. So there's a very big battle going on, and we've got to decide, do we want a democratic China or a totalitarian China? And if we want a democratic one, let's be on the side of democracy.
All right, thanks very much, Russel Norman. Cheers.
Thank you.
Co-leader of the Greens, Russel.